Significant public lands belong to the people. They're held by government on trust for the people. They do not belong to government departments or authorities, and they do not belong to the government of the day. They belong to the people. The power of government comes from the people. We don't live in a dictatorship, thank heavens, in Australia. Sometimes we may think we do, but we don't. And governments must respect the will of the people, and they must respect significant public lands. Now, what are significant public lands? They are lands that have environmental or heritage or social or community value. You can define it more and add architecture and everything else, but it's valued by the community. Where they're valued by the community or of use or potential use in the future to the community. And they belong to the public, they're belonging to the people. People have fought for those lands. They have made contributions to the land. They've acted as volunteers on that land over decades. How dare any government come along and say, that's ours, we're going to take it and flog it off to balance our books for 1 year.
Of all the engagements during August 1942, as the Australians withdrew across the mountains, perhaps this was the toughest and most important.
How are you?
Good to see you again.
How has the walk been so far?
It's been wonderful.
And how long more have you got to go?
Oh, we've got about another 14 days or something to go,
days?
yes. Yeah, so we're over the halfway mark.
Sammy just thinks if anyone wants coffee or anything, just let me know and I'll organise that. And
hey,
perfectly on time.
Good to see you. How are you? Mate, look,
losing a bit of weight.
I was 18 stone when I started off. Look at me now.
You're right.
Looks very good.
So further get Sammy to sit down.
Mr Mayor, thank you very much for being here on what is a special occasion. We're about halfway through our walk at the moment, 315 kilometre walk around Sydney's foreshores.
Can I just congratulate you on this initiative, because I think it's fantastic to open up to more people the understanding of these beautiful walks. And I brought this shovel with me today particularly to advise you that the Mayor here at Canada Bay is still working hard to connect our foreshores. And this shovel has come from the big launch opening today of a bridge that will be built between Wentworth Point and Rhodes, the two communities. And that'll link Homebush Bay, which means that will give walkers an opportunity to walk from here to Rhodes to Olympic Park. It's a green bridge, and it's just another connection for walkers around the foreshore. Canada Bay's got more foreshore than any other council in the harbour. We've got 35 kilometres of foreshore.
On October the 6th, 1942, the 2nd 33rd Battalion reached the southern edge of the Foggy Ridge. In the following 2 days, they buried 99 Australians from the 21st Brigade who'd been killed a month earlier on Mission Ridge and Brigade Hill. On October the 11th, they began a fierce battle against a battalion of Japanese who had dug in with machine gun and sniper pits reinforced by heavy logs. In cold conditions, fog and dim light, the Australians scrambled on hands and knees up steep slopes through dense undergrowth, fighting at times hand to hand, until 4 days later they had cleared the ridge. At least 100 Japanese were killed and many wounded. The 2nd 33rd Battalion lost 21 killed and 48 wounded. The battalion was awarded a number of decorations for bravery.
We lost 1,660 Australians killed, 2,500 were wounded, and this is where the American 133rd Marines were there. They lost 600 killed in one morning because they just come in and they were green like we were. We had to learn the hard way, and that's what they did the same. But that's where we lost our main lot of men. All these names of these villages, this is the only one that was named after an Australian. The other 21 were all, as I said, Fuzzy Wuzzy's homes, their villages. This one was named after Captain Sam Templeton. When I was 18, he was a 54-year-old from the First World War. He was a very brave man, and we found out after the war that the Japanese tortured him to find out how many troops were in front of him, what sort of weapons they had, and then they beheaded him. This is the sort of thing they did the whole time. And when they 20,000 Japanese landed at Buna going to San Anita, there was a missionary station there which had one man, two ladies and a 7-year-old boy. Now the 20,000 landed in the morning. In the afternoon they took the whole lot of the 4 of them down the beach and beheaded the lot of them. This is what they did right throughout the whole campaign. And as we start to push them back, they were that hungry they were chewing the bark off trees and eating it. They got blind. In the end they were cutting the flesh off our dead souls' buttocks and sucking it, and also chewing and sucking their fingers. So they turned to cannibalism. Okay, the first picture here on the wall, excuse me, was taken at Christmas Day at Buna in 1942. The soldier with the eye wound was Private Dick Whittington. He had this wound just below his eye. He was taken back to a casualty clearing station. They operated on him and sent back to his unit, and 18 days later he died. He didn't die of the wound, he died of this dreadful disease called scrub typhus. I came back here in a hospital. I came back in a hospital ship, the Katoomba, and I spent 3 months here recuperating, and then I went straight back to my unit, which by this time I collapsed on the 21st of January 1943, and the Japanese surrendered what was left of them on 22nd of January 1943.
Thomas Walker, banker and philanthropist, died in 1886 at Concord in New South Wales, leaving a large fortune that ultimately came to rest on his daughter, Edith. Part of Walker's will was set aside to found the Thomas Walker Convalescent Hospital. In its first 20 years, nearly 18,000 convalescent patients, all non-paying, received the benefit of this hospital. In the early 1900s, author Henry Lawson was several times a patient there, treated for his alcoholism. Known today as Rivendell, the hospital specialises in the treatment of young people with problems.
Well, welcome to Rivendell. This is the Thomas Walker Memorial Hospital, but now that they're using it for children, they decided a better name for it, a more appealing name was Rivendell rather than the Thomas Walker Convalescent Hospital. It was finished in 1893 and it was left by money from Thomas's will because he wanted to have a memorial hospital in his name, and he wanted it to be a free hospital that people could come to and not have to pay. He left £125,000 in the will, and by the time that John Sulman, the architect, had gone overseas and imported everything from tea towels to doorknobs from England, he'd spent more than that, so there wasn't the money to make it a free hospital. So to get around what his will had stipulated, they said you can come here for free but you must make an equivalent donation of your costs to RPA. And the reason that RPA sort of had the rights to use the estates was that charities that Edith supported, the names all went into a hat and RPA came out, so they got the rights to use the estates for benevolent but not religious purposes, according to Thomas's will. This has been used virtually continually since 1893. So the main way to come up here was by steamer from Circular Quay, and they had these what they call marker trees, these very tall pines, so that people knew where, you know, if they were coming around and it was foggy or whatever. Thomas came to Australia as a courier for his father, who was a member of the British Parliament, and he was carrying in his luggage a promissory note for £1 million, and the paperwork with it was to go to the Colonial Secretary because they were to buy 1 million acres of land for the British Crown and pay £1 an acre. And that's how our Crown land came about. He started a bank called the Bank of Australasia, which lasted for 3 weeks because he built it beside the tank stream, which had been covered over. And thieves broke in on one weekend and they cleaned him out. So he then joined the Bank of New South Wales, which is now Westpac, and he was a director of that bank for the rest of his life and the president for the last 17 years of his life, so he was well into banking.
Well, in 1985, Bob Carr launched the Concord Foreshore Trail, which was this magnificent walk from Rhodes basically around to Majors Bay and the Parramatta River, which went around the former Thomas Walker estate. It was an instant success. It's probably one of our best walks in Sydney, if not Australia. However, in May of 2010, the Department of Health decided to close the walk around the Thomas Walker Convalescent Hospital site, now Rivendell, and all hell broke loose, frankly. I mean, this was foreshore land, a fantastic walk, and the state government's Department of Health, who should be looking after our health, was going to close this walk to the public. So the walking volunteers and others, we had a bit of a kind of, and some politicians, we had a walk, and we put the test to them. We just walked it regardless. Were they going to arrest us? Were the police going to be there and arrest politicians and the walking volunteers? No, they didn't turn up.
This next point we're walking to,
Yaralla.
What's that?
It's it's the main mansion where the walkers lived, who owned all of this land, but it's an Aboriginal word meaning dwelling place or meeting place. Thomas only had the one child, Edith. Many years later in life, his youngest brother died before he could marry and have issue, and Aunt Joanna never married either, and there were about 3 or 4 other children in the meantime who had either died while Thomas was sailing out here or died of early childhood diseases. So on that side of the family, the lineage virtually stopped with Edith. And the original design by Blackett only had the right-hand side as 2-storey, the left-hand side was 1-storey. So in later years, when John Sulman became involved with the estate, because he married the girl who was raised with Edith, he put the 2nd storey on. We've got the guest register from 1897 to 1937, so we've got 40 years of signatures of the rich, the famous, the infamous, who were here, and their comments about what it was like to live here at Yaralla. There is a plaque in the centre here for Leanne Poulton. She was one of our members. She left us $50,000 to have the Four Winds fountain restored in her will. We found a quarter of the fountain which had been broken by a teenager many years before who broke it, and then it fell on him and broke his leg. So you've got the Four Winds, which are the lower level, and of course the lions on the top, which is a reference to the lion family, the Lyons. So the water cascades down and then through the Four Winds fountain. But there's a grid there that we were told it's sort of a bit of a safety issue with children, so that's why we've grown this prickly bush there. But this was their tennis court down here, and down below that is what was the pool area, which has been filled in, but there's a grotto along there. Now all of this work was done by Italian tradesmen that she brought out. They did the fountain, they did this, and they did the grotto, and the grotto is quite extensive, and it was built by chicken wire, cement and big dobs of chook poo, which they plastered all together, and then once it was dry they hosed it off and the chook poo came out, so it makes it look like it's all natural sandstone, and it's amazing to see it, but it was actually handmade. Straight in front of us was a bathhouse that went out over the pool, and you can see where the lady is there at the diving board. She's standing on what was the edge of the diving board.
These are the stables at Yaralla. They were designed by later Sir John Sulman. They're designed, they almost look like a centrepiece of an old English village. It's a lovely courtyard there, and a tower entrance, and the loveliest thing is the little bell tower on the top, complete with the running fox on the weather vane.